let's say that your company is about to announce some great news, and you're also about to issue some equity awards. In fact, those equity awards are scheduled to be issued just after you make this great announcement. Should you stick to your original schedule and go ahead and wait until after the announcement to issue the equity awards? Or should you move those equity awards up and get them issued just ahead of the announcement? Well, moving those equity awards up and issuing them ahead of the announcement is called spring loading. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the problem with spring loading. Spring loading is exactly what I just described. We have a great announcement that we're going to make. You can see here on my line graph here that after we make that announcement, our stock price just rockets up. And we get in some equity grants just ahead of that announcement so that those equity grants are issued when our stock price is still nice and low. And we all know that when we're issuing equity grants, it's better if we can issue them when the stock price is low, because that provides a lot more potential appreciation to the employees. In fact, in this example, not only do the employees have more potential appreciation, but literally just days after we've issued the grants, those grants are significantly in the money. By issuing the grants while our stock price was still low, that results in a lower per share fair value for the equity awards. And because most companies use a value-based approach to sizing their equity awards, that lower per share fair value means that those equity awards are going to be for more shares. So the employees have more potential appreciation and they have bigger equity awards. But there is a catch. Because those larger equity awards mean more dilution for our shareholders. And more dilution means more cost to the company to offset that dilution. And in addition, if those equity awards are stock options, the options will have a lower exercise price, which means fewer proceeds that the company can use to offset that dilution. Critics of spring loading have called it an unfair use of information, misleading to investors, unethical, and possibly even illegal. In this video, I'm going to set the legal implications of spring loading aside, and instead I'm going to focus on Staff Accounting Bulletin number 120. This is an accounting bulletin issued by the SEC that provides guidance to companies on how they need to value spring-loaded grants. So back to our example here, where we've got these grants that we issued just ahead of our great announcement. Staff Accounting Bulletin number 120 says that when we are determining the fair value of those equity grants, we should take into consideration the effect of that announcement. That's likely going to increase the fair value of those grants and increase the amount of expense the company has to recognize for them. In the NASPP webinar, 10 Things Shaping What's Next in Equity Compensation, Takis Makritis of Equity Methods goes through a great example of this to illustrate the potential impact of the fair value. One thing that Takis notes is that if those equity awards are stock options, the fair value might be even higher than if the company had waited until after the announcement to issue the equity awards. In addition to the implications on the fair value, SAB 120 also specifies disclosures that the SEC expects companies to make about spring-loaded grants. And in addition to those disclosures, the SEC has proposed requiring a tabular disclosure of spring-loaded grants. SAB 120 does distinguish between routine and non-routine grants. So back to our example here, if those equity awards that we issued just ahead of that announcement, if those were part of a pattern under which we always issue equity awards on this day of the month or this day of the quarter or this day of the year, in that case, the fair value adjustment and the disclosures might not be necessary, because we might be able to argue that we would have issued those grants anyway, even if we hadn't made that announcement. During the webinar, Takis offers 5 really great tips on how companies should respond to SAB 120. Takis's first tip is to review your current grant practices. So look at things like how you schedule grants and how they're approved to determine if maybe you need to make any adjustments to your procedures. Takesa's second tip is to educate your leadership team, so your board of directors and your executive team, on the implications of making unscheduled grants and of spring-loading those grants. Takesa's third tip is to update your current grant process so that when you are issuing equity awards, you check to see if there are any planned announcements in the weeks following those grants. Takesa's fourth tip is if you do discover that you have a planned announcement, you should already have a policy in place as to what you're going to do about those equity awards. Are you going to go ahead and issue them anyway, knowing that they might impact the company's fair value? Or are you going to delay them until after the announcement? Whatever you do, it's likely to impact the fair value of the grants. And then lastly, if you do go ahead and issue those grants in advance of the announcement, Takesa recommends that you consider the implications of the disclosures you're going to have to make about those grants. So that is my quick take on spring-loaded equity awards. The NASPP webinar that I mentioned is 10 things shaping what's next in equity compensation. Like I said, Takesa Makritis of Equity Methods provides a really fantastic discussion in the webinar of what spring-loading is, what the fair value implications are, and then he also goes through those 5 tips with a little bit more detail than what I've been able to do here today. I really hope that you'll check the webinar out. It's available on the NASPP website. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That really helps us out. And you are also notified when we post new videos. Win-win for everyone. Thanks for watching.